Hello and welcome. I love seeing all these people come in. And if you would like to put something in the chat about where you're zooming in from today, that would be terrific. It's always fun to see. I'm Meg Weston. I'm host and founder of the Poets Corner, and we're located in Maine. So, as you might surmise, it's cold. It started to snow. And I see a lot of people who are here along the East Coast that are probably in a similar situation. And then people that are coming in from Colorado and Scotland and all kinds of places. So that's great. Love, 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 love having you. Today is a very special reading. We're doing this reading to benefit the Millay House Rockland. So I'm just going to say a few words about the Poets Corner and about Millay House Rockland, and then I'm going to turn it over to my fellow Millay House board member, poet and archivist and very talented poet who chairs our programs committee, and that's Jefferson Navicky. So about the Poets Corner. The Poets Corner was founded in June of 2020 because we were all sheltered in and we were desperate for some community and to hear some poetry and meet other poets. And so we got it started with a Sunday reading series, and we invited friends, and they invited other friends, and it just snowballed, so to speak, from there. And today we have over 8,000 members from all over the world. And we get to host wonderful poets. It's poetry in short prose. And today we have a poet and a lyric essayist, and that's the kind of thing we love to host. I serve on the board. I'm president of the board of the Millay House in Rockland, and Jefferson's also a fellow board member. And the Millay House is the home, it's a duplex in Rockland, Maine, where Edna St. Vincent Millay was born in 1892. And in the mid 90s, the house was dilapidated, it was run down, it was privately owned, but it was on the National Historic Register. And a group of people got together and decided they would buy it and restore it. And they formed a nonprofit and brought the house back by totally restoring the house. And today, one side of the house is rented on a year-round basis to provide the operating funds, and the other side of the house is for residencies, for writers. We have 3 juried residencies each year, and we're just about to open the call for the next juried residencies. They will be for October of 2026 or July of 2027. It opens on February 22nd, Millay's birthday. And you're going to have a little insider information here that hasn't been announced yet. But our judge this year will be the poet Dorianne Locks. It's open to writers in any genre because Millay wrote in many other genres. So, in addition to offering writers a place to come and write and be inspired by Millay, we do programming for our community and programs such as this and others that Jefferson might say a word or two about that are available. We have memberships, and that's what helps support the Millay House programs, scholarships we do for youth that are interested in writing and other things. So if you're interested in supporting the Millay House, please go to millayhouserockland.org and click on donate or become a member. Memberships start at $50, and programs like these and other programs that we can give discounts to members are wonderful. And many of you I know that are on here have already donated or become a member, and we thank you very much. So that's all from me today. I'm going to turn it over to Jefferson. And Jefferson, thank you for bringing us this really lovely program today.
Thank you, Meg. Nice to see you all here today on Sunday. So before we get into the event, I thought that I was going to find a good use for AI. And what I was going to do was I was going to ask AI, say, what is the word or the phrase when two old friends from very different parts of one's life meet and somehow inspire each other? Because I didn't know the word for that. And I thought maybe AI will know this word. So, spoiler alert, it did not happen. It said that what you were looking for is a phrase that does not exist in English. So, so much for AI. But I can tell you what it feels like. To me, it feels like there are these two tectonic plates that are quite a quite a distance apart, and then because of some force of nature, they come close to each other, and they maybe even shake hands and inspire each other to help write books. And it's a pretty incredible feeling. Uh, I have been, or I was in a long time writing group with Katherine Larson, and I saw over the years what was is to become the wedding of the foxes come along and come along and come along. And if you were to pick it up now, it's a very elegant book. It's put together really gracefully, and that totally belies the huge amount of hard work that I saw Katherine put into this book. Like patience, persistence, but really I think tenacity to make a book that is as good as this. She really put a lot of effort into it, uh, and it shows. And so you can imagine the surprise that when I was reading through it at one point, and there is a poem from Miho Nonaki, and I won't tell you what it was or what happened because you're going to find about that later. But I can tell you that I've known Miho since the summer of 1999 when we both studied in Prague at a writing seminar where Miho was sort of the star poet in one of the writing workshops, and I took a fables class with the Czech writer and Holocaust survivor Arnošt Lustig. It was an amazing event or month, and that it took a long time to kind of settle into my mind. So Miho and I kept in touch a little bit over the years, mainly through beloved mutual friend Allison Albino, and then in the pandemic when Museum of Small Bones was published, Miho's poetry book, I thought I'm going to get that. Why not? This is seems like a perfect excuse to do it, and I got it and I read it, and I was not prepared for how good of a book this is. Like this is a book really that has one of my most favorite books in the past 5 years, and I keep going back to it and I read it and I read it over again. So you can tell how much this event means to me, but I think it's going to mean a lot to you. Both of these are incredible writers, and we are going to talk about poetry and lyric essays. So it's going to be a real treat for this afternoon. So before we get into the readings, I'll just tell you how it's going to go. I'm going to turn it over to Katherine in a moment. She's going to do a small reading, and then Miho will read a bunch of work, and then we'll go back to Katherine, and she'll finish off the reading, and then I have a couple questions I'm going to ask them. But if a question comes up that you would like to ask, you can put it into the chat and we'll save it towards the end, or you can just ask it yourself. I think you'll be able to unmute or use the raise hand function, and we will be able to talk or towards the end of the event. So uh, I think that's all for me. So thank you all, and I'm going to turn it over to Katherine.
Hello. I first want to begin by thanking Jefferson Navicky and Millay House Rockland for so generously hosting this event. As was mentioned, Millay House Rockland honors the life and work of Edna St. Vincent Millay. while also nurturing writers and artists in the wider creative community. And so I'm very deeply grateful to be here. And I also want to thank Miho Nonaka for the gift of her presence here today. Both Jefferson, if you don't know Jefferson's Antique Densities, I highly recommend this truly remarkable book. And then Miho's, which I'm so thrilled to be here to hear her read because this will be the first time that I have a chance to hear her read. So they're just two of my absolute favorite living writers. They're both brilliant. And I want to also thank you for being here from all across, not just the country, but the world, in snow and in sunshine and rainstorm and electrical, who knows what. So thank you so much because your presence and your listening are such a gift, and I'm really grateful for it. To tell you a little bit about the book, because I'm only going to read a little bit of the book, Wedding of the Foxes. It was written in a time of rupture and recalibration during the pandemic and its aftermath as both personal and planetary losses accumulated. It's a book about invisible things, about relationships that often go unnoticed between people, between species, between the living and dying world. It asks what we fail to see and why, what voices, human and more than human, are left out of the stories we tell, and how we might begin to notice more, to listen more deeply. It's a book woven of Japanese literature, motherhood, ecological grief, the sixth extinction, and a preoccupation with erasure, not just what's vanishing, but how silence itself works in language, memory, and the body. It's also a book about fracture and repair, about quiet forms of resistance and resilience that emerge not in spite of what's broken, but through it. We need that right about now. Also, Godzilla, Pokemon, Miyazaki films, the fun stuff. So this afternoon, I'm going to begin by reading just the shortest piece of an introductory essay because it will lead you right into Miho's wonderful work and one of her truly fantastic poems called The Leafy Sea Dragon. So this is from the first essay in the book called Threshold, Compass and Mirror. And the book is composed of various types of lyric essays, both epistolary essays and braided lyric essays. This one is a braided lyric essay. When the gulls started fighting, it was over the trash snarled in the harbor water. Paper coffee cups and oil-slicked twigs tangled among Sprite bottles. I'd left my apartment on Rugby Road in the dark and arrived in Baltimore before the aquarium opened. The sun rose. I watched the gulls pick apart a bag of Doritos. The buildings parse the pink of the sky into glassy triangles. It was the kind of waiting that makes you feel like a grimy plate of glass being slowly squeegeed. I'd driven through the early morning hours to see the sea dragons. I'd never seen them before, not in person. Like their seahorse relatives, leafy sea dragons are from the family Cygnathidae, whose members possess traits so unusual that Victorian naturalists and scientists, even as recently as the 19th century, found them difficult to classify. While seahorses possess prehensile tails, leafy sea dragons are known for the leaf-like skin filaments that embellish their serpentine bodies, hybrids of both plant and dragon. When I first saw them suspended in their aquarium, they looked like tiny golden chandeliers of seaweed. Buoyant, impossibly delicate, they moved so languidly it was as if they swam through cooling glass. I stepped closer and the sound of the crowd withdrew. I felt as though a window had opened in my chest and something had slipped inside, nudging past my sagging organs and depositing little pinprick sparks of electricity. I was no longer a self, the way the sea dragons were no longer creatures clasped in an aqueous cube. Something pulsed between and through us, and even when I drove home a few hours later, the sky seemed impossibly larger, and I still felt those invisible trailing tendrils, unspooling over miles, linking their lives with mine. Years passed, and those sea dragons were mostly forgotten. One sweltering August, my partner and I were stranded in Cuba for 2 weeks when our airline went bankrupt. We flew back from Havana on a Russian plane with cigarette burns on the seats and exit signs written in Cyrillic. I started throwing up before I even got a positive pregnancy test. It happened quickly. One day I was collecting the rare books of a Cuban poet to translate. A week later, I couldn't shower or dress myself without help. Hyperemesis gravidarum is a severe pregnancy-long form of nausea and vomiting. I found myself suddenly afloat in the buzzing atmosphere of my body's molecule-level distress. I felt as though the self I knew was being sheared from me. What was left had to sink down and become something else. Time grew into a shadowy hand of erasure, relooping the text of each day at an anguishingly sluggish pace. I spent entire days in dark rooms with my eyes closed. Screens made me vomit, but sometimes I could read a little. In a winter issue of Plowshares, I found the poem The Leafy Sea Dragon by Miho Nonaki. Curled in a shadowed bedroom, I read this line: Life makes a sea full of superfluous things. It made me remember what it was like to stand in the aquarium that day, to behold a creature so unfathomable it seemed an excess. And I'm going to hand it off to Miho. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Um, and let's see. Can you hear me? It says unmute myself. Okay. You can hear me? Okay, great. Thank you. It's such an amazing such an amazing gift for me to be able to read with Catherine um, and um, and also with Jefferson, those two amazing authors. And I'm also grateful to Millay House and that Poets Corner. This actually happens to be the anniversary of my father's passing. This is the first anniversary. And I can't really tell you how grateful I am to be with a community of writers and also readers. And Catherine's beautiful book, The Wedding of the Foxes, um, I had a, I had an honor of blurbing this book, and I was just so stunned by this collection, so much so that I would actually type out some of the passages, some of the descriptions from each chapter, and I would kind of carry it with me like a talisman. So I'm a big fan. And thank you so much for my friends and also Catherine's fans. I'm one of you. I'm a Catherine's fan as well. So I'm gonna start by reading the poem Catherine just mentioned, and this was written after I went to see the leafy sea dragon in an aquarium in New Orleans. And one of the descriptions they had in the aquarium was kind of describing it as this kind of extravagantly beautiful thing, and it kind of feels superfluous or useless. Um, and that kind of offended me. And I um, I just thought I would have to write kind of like an ode for this supposedly a superfluous thing. So, the leafy sea dragon. Life makes a sea full of superfluous things. In shallow waters, among seagrass meadows, hide toy dragons with frilly appendages like tattered leaves. Such dragon wings, never meant for flight, help them merge into the background of kelp beds, swaying back and forth with a lukewarm current, back and forth like flotsam. Their eyes above the tube's snouted mouths are a spatter of bitter tea, divining the next ocean surge or another chain of sea lice for gulping. Instead of scales, shielded by bony plates darkening at the edges, they grow skeptical of all modes of eloquence, even prayer. The leafy sea dragon floats beyond attention, exilium and winter-starved. Never dreaming of the dilation of spirit, It glides down in slashed filaments, not without grace, as if its image were less a costume than a curious extension of the soul. And I'm reading from the Museum of Small Bones. I want to read two more poems from this. I think I was really, well, I said I was offended by the description of useless or superfluous. I think because I was feeling as a graduate student in those days, I just felt pretty useless. And just like the artist Joseph Cornell, he's a guardian of the fragile. I thought I want to become the guardian of the useless. And so this one references this Kojiki, that's Records of Ancient Matters. That's the oldest collection of Japanese creation myth, early 8th century, and mentions Princess Ogetsu. And so I think that's all you need to know. When I feel I'm not much used to human society is a title. That's the longest title I've ever given to any poem I wrote. When I feel I'm not much used to human society. Think of the story of Princess Ogetsu, the unsparing goddess of food, how she was murdered, and what came out of her body afterwards. Silkworms from her head, rice grains from her eyes, foxtail millet and azuki beans from her ears and nose, barley and soybean from her belly. When I die, I will likely be an aquarium, bright and square as a little TV. My screen will show octopus eggs like a bunch of incandescent grapes, holding the words I didn't dare say when I was alive, but I wanted to say when I was with you. And one more poem from this collection. This poem has mentions a silver pavilion that's now turned into a temple in Kyoto. Miniature pavilion. The good news is I started sleeping without pills. It still feels foreign though, like everything else. Some nights I pretend I'm lying at the bottom of the river, my eyes fixed on the shadows that cannot come down to touch my body, those leaves at the surface, those weightless veined wings. For once, I imagine I'm not married to fear. I will remain artless and unharmed. Are we allowed to bring anything to the underworld? Will we have desires then? Some nights, I miss you like the smell of a flint struck with steel. Remember the silver pavilion, its sand garden with eyes of mica? They flicker when the moon is out. Take that sight with you on your way down. You know I hate the word exotic, but there will be no mystery of distances after you die. And I know we can only love small things, those which become part of us through the art of containment. What covered the roof of the pavilion was not silver, but moss, and it was starting to snow that night. We ate steamed lily bulbs without salt, in silence. I can only remember small things, and the silver pavilion is turning ever so small in your hand. I see it from here. Water keeps flowing above me. I will not be able to rest as you do, however much I try. I stay at the riverbed, my hair streaming with bits of shells and bones. I see your body being carried deeper than where I am now, downward. These are newer poems that I'm going to read. I was thinking, as a graduate student in East Asian Studies, well, I was doing my master's, Japanese lit, and even though it was, it kind of entailed a lot of suffering and money, I couldn't remember much from like what my professor taught me. One thing was, I just remember he taught me in Japan there are a lot of trees that produce acorns and they all have different names. But he said, you should you should translate those trees as oak, any tree that produces acorn. And that was shocking to me, and it still stays with me. So, flowers and acorns. A Japanologist with eyes like barnacles once said, "You must translate any tree that produces acorns an oak." He'd recite poems about the full moon, cherry blossoms, unrequited heart. He couldn't care less about the trees that produced different acorns. I say he was right. Every language has its own economy. Still, the way he spoke of flowers, moonlight, lovers' sleeves wet with tears when parting at dawn, as though those were his own sleeves, made me nervous. After I received his love poem in 5 and 7 syllables. In the tale of Genji, Shining Prince keeps courting new women through his poems, when in fact his heart yearns for the mother who died when he was a baby. His mostly featureless, bodiless lovers wait for him in their toilet rooms, their long hair flowing this way or that, uncontrollable as their fate. Do I fancy myself one of those ladies named after plants, flowers, cicada shell, or something more original, say acorn, fungus, barometric pressure? I want to live more as an atmosphere than an actual person, free of anyone's impulse to fetishize thwarted desire and call it scholarship. Let the world keep floating. Each of Genji's tiny lovers hover, a gossamer-winged butterfly, against the gravity that pulls her deeper down into the isolation, more cosmic than cosmetic. So when my father passed away, he was cremated, and in the States, cremation, I think you get ash, but in Japan, you get, in addition to ash, you get a heap of bones. And you, as a family member, have to transfer those bones to the urn using chopsticks. It's a ritual, and it's supposed to help the deceased to pass over the river of Nether and go into another realm, pass on to another realm. I knew this all along. I grew up in Japan, but it was still shocking when I had to do that. And this poem, for the first time, I wrote with a lot of gaps in. Um, among clusters of words. It's called cremation. When my father comes out again, he, a heap of bones too hot to touch, the man in uniforms hands me chopsticks, bones, shattered coral branches. I wrap a few, a white powder, porous father, spilling through my handkerchief. My sister grabs the chopsticks, picks silver-filled teeth heavier than bones. Please stop. The man invites everyone to transfer my father to the urn bone by bone, chopsticks diving deep into the bone, the kneecap, the femur, breaking, spilling my father. Please stop. His former students now, professors, CEOs, cry, Sensei. But you could say, you should know, I was his first student who failed spectacularly. His love, harsh powder, spilling through my fingers. Stop. A man's clinical voice tells which bone goes where, what function it served. Look at this jawbone. Gray bone doesn't mean sick, just uneven heat. He scoops up the rest, the powder and all, into the urn, puts my father's glasses on top, the only thing fire didn't touch, shuts the lid with a clink. Then, no more, please. And that was that. And the next poem mentions a local temple that uh, I and my parents used to frequent, and they had every June they had a hydrangea festival, and because they're known for all the hydrangeas they had on their ground. So hydrangea festival, so quiet, as if we were the only ones who remembered the celebration at this medieval temple, except for a gaunt man on the canvas chair taking bites of his rice ball and painting the flowers in watercolor. So-called hydrangea flavor soft serve tasted like blueberry, mother laughs. the end of the monsoon season, and the beginning of summer. We skip the whole of Hudomyo, the immovable Lord of Light, whose fierce stare cuts through ignorance, the source of our suffering. All along the rocky pass through the hills behind the temple, 7,000 hydrangeas bloom in silence. Their wet, dreamy heads beckon us on as we slowly make our way up. Impatient father, who always walks far ahead of me, is, for once, behind me, telling me to watch my steps. When I say the little life inside me has grown to the size of a grapefruit, he nods and mother smiles. Among clusters of white, pink, blue flowers stand Jizo statues, guardians of children and travelers, gentle, half covered in moss. Later, not without pain, I will remember the joy I feel now, not piercing, but brimming to the full. Inside, my son continues to ripen. Outside, both mother and father, still sure-footed, sandwiching me, surrounded by the bright faces of hydrangea, whose meanings, they say, are family, harmony, deep apology, and impermanence. And this is the last poem I'm going to read. So when my father passed, of course, I was devastated. And it kind of felt like the tree of life just died. Whatever the forest I was in, like this kind of an enchanting forest, just kind of withered. And I was wondering, where do I go from here to find a source of enchantment? So, fireflies in the bamboo grove. June, dusk. When after another fireflies glow, each light a sudden flower, a desire, flowing around the green stalks. I'm out with lanterns looking for myself, taking some road to a friend. Even through my wounded corneas, their yellow-green flashes are bright enough to remind me I have a self, and it is hollow. High above, a half moon is dissolving in mist. I have fallen out of the dreams you dreamed for me, now that your body has turned into ash. No more magic. The leaves rustle, the stalks bend slightly like bones with no marrow, and night fills with moisture, deeper darkness. Still, the fireflies continue to pulse. They won't stop their signal, come hither. It surprises me each time, a decision of the soul to reveal itself for a split second, whispering, here is wonder, this is enchantment. You must live. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Miho. It's very difficult to go after that. I think first of all, I'm so glad that you could be here in this community that loves your work and admires what you bring on this anniversary. I'm so happy to be able to be in community with you like that here. And I think too, something you just said, where do I go from here to find a form of enchantment? I'm gonna read a section, just a small section of small, they're just kind of micro essays, but they could also be kind of prose poems. And they're from a part of the book called The Micro Seasons. And I think it was a very similar thing during the pandemic. I was walking around my backyard a lot and my neighborhood a lot with my kids, and I discovered something that, unlike the Western calendar's 4 seasons, the traditional Japanese calendar was composed of 72 micro seasons, each of about 5 days. And I was so intrigued by this, and I thought to myself, well, maybe as a kind of project, I'll just start to write a series every 5 days based on what I see and find. And these micro seasons were really evocatively named, things like Frog Starts Singing or Rainbows Hide. There's a field of science called phenology where you pay attention to that kind of thing, like when migrations appear and that kind of thing. And so this is a series. These are just some of the selections from that series. The first part of the title is the traditional Japanese title, and then the second part of the title is from the Sonoran Desert counterpart, because that's where I'm from, in the Sonoran Desert. This first one is First Peach Blossom, Wildflowers Emerge. Her favorite list essay in Sei Shonagon's pillow book is the one titled Things That Make One's Heart Beat Faster. Even though it was written over 1,000 years ago, she finds the list moving and relatable. To notice that one's elegant Chinese mirror has become a little cloudy, Shonagon writes, sparrows feeding their young. She thinks of this list when she notices one evening that the wildflowers have returned with their riotous colors, seeds kicking open after sleeping all this time inside the earth, the shuddering golds of Mexican poppies, the fragile pinks of desert evening primrose. What makes her heart beat faster is thinking of the ticking of their tiny hidden clocks. All around her, invisible bells tolling. Wake up, unfurl, regrow. She steps with care among them, those pigment-stained petals, those hundreds of living cathedrals. Sparrows start to nest, citrus starts to bloom. The children decide to make their own perfume by crushing citrus blossoms in the mortar, waxy purples in the lemon, ivories in the grapefruit and tangerine. They mix their potions carefully, then jam them into tiny vials with small cork stoppers. Eugenio Montale knew lemons are vials of memory light. The air is so heavy with scent, she wants to put it on a plate and eat it, slice its thick perfume apart with a fork and knife like a dense piece of cake. She knows months from now, cardboard boxes will appear on the neighbors' walkways, filled with fruit to be given away. Then the air will be clear, the citrus heavy in the hand as doorknobs. Distant thunder, cloudless sulfur butterflies appear. She was 16 years old at the time, living in another country whose tropics landed much closer to the equator. She'd never seen a volcano erupt before. Night was best for the viewing, but the mosquitoes in the marshes along the river were so thick she nearly inhaled them. They feasted on everyone. Even if you rubbed the bites carefully instead of scratching, they'd bleed. It was worth it to watch the sky light up in a color that can only be described as molten neon, to see in all that darkness rock being born. Now when she sees the first cloudless sulfur butterfly appear, she thinks of the same kind of light, remembering what it means to be a witness to another's life, another new configuration arriving. First rainbows, lizards return. The lawn gnomes were strange companions. She preferred the gardens in the middle of their street, the ones with the giant Peruvian apple cactus and fairy duster shrubs and agaves that sprawled beneath the mesquites like languid octopuses. But this yard had a kind of magic to it. There were glass balls filled with little colored fairy lights, a paz sign with the word written in 3 different languages, ceramic fairy houses, one made from a tiny cactus instead of a mushroom, gnomes all over. She hadn't noticed until this year the lizards returning. Now she sees this is a yard in which they delight. ornate tree lizards basking on the little patios, hidden sandy nooks with greater earless lizards peeking out, a likely spot to lay their eggs. Clearly, the setup, arranged with such careful attention, had its own enchantment. Who was she to know what the lizards wanted? Who was she to know what they might enjoy? Worms surface, green oranges fall. The clouds while driving the kids home from school, diaphanous blooms with trailing tentacles like a row of sky jellyfish. Leafing through Izumi Shikibu's poems so many times that day, she'd given herself 2 paper cuts. She can't stop thinking about the invisible stains Shikibu mentions. The stain of a lover's body, the stain of the wind. Here, the stain is the heavy smell of green things sunning themselves. Pungent, exuberant, all the green baby oranges rolling around on the sidewalk like someone has abandoned a game of marbles. Their scent stains the tips of her fingers. Nothing in the world is usual today. This is the first morning, Izumi Shikibu wrote more than 1,000 years ago. When she looks at the orange tree, she sees a being so full of its own bounty that it simply must let some of it go. Silkworms start feasting on mulberry leaves, night-blooming cereus blossoms. She notices early one morning the night-blooming cereus in her neighbor's yard is full of dozens of wilting blossoms. Cereus are pollinated by hawk moths and only bloom at night. The blossoms look like feather dusters dipped in wax. Even the shredded memory of their fragrance is enough to make her kick off her bed sheets while still half asleep to find them. What she finds instead are birds. Near the early morning, as soon as she opens the door, thousands of migrating songbirds, warblers, flycatchers, hummingbirds, hidden inside the newly leafed branches. Strange to see the world so still, yet hear it transformed by sound. The following night, she steps out with her flashlight and finds a single mockingbird singing its heart out, its song brash against the stillness and utterly singular, a sound of glass being struck, an old shower knob being squinched open over and over, a song as if some winged being has been caught in a net and is struggling, pleading for its life. Why such anguish at midnight? She learns that young male mockingbirds grow desperate if they haven't found a mate during breeding season, sometimes singing all night in a last-ditch attempt to attract one. She knows only the human words, but is it strange to feel a kinship with that loneliness, to stand there in the dark and feel her body blushing in the heat of all that longing? And I'll just do probably 3 more. Cool winds blow, fig-eater beetles swarm. It's monsoon season, air thick with moisture, sterile thunder thumping in the distance but not yet loosening its rain. Scattered in the fine dirt around the prickly pear cactus, the green iridescent bodies of fig-eater beetles. Among them, little mutilated cradles of hollowed-out prickly pear fruit. They mate in throngs, lay eggs, and perish. The baby grubs winding their sleep around the dry haze of rattling leaves, around the death scrabbles of their parents, those heavy emeralds thudding the dust. How strange and how familiar to happen upon beginnings and endings in a single space. Fecundity and death meeting like old friends in a summer house where, arm in arm, they quietly walk about, admiring the furniture. And I'll do, I think, just a couple more. Heat starts to die down, canyon tree frogs emerge. Here's a story she remembers from her childhood. A samurai takes a brief nap beneath an ancient cedar and dreams his way into another world. Welcomed into a lush palatial estate, he's soon invited to wed the august princess who bears him 7 children. 24 idyllic years pass. His wife falls gravely ill and dies. He's told by royal messenger he's to be sent back home and wakes to find himself still beneath the cedar only moments after he'd fallen asleep. Yet when he looks around, he finds a colony of ants, their intricate structures of straw and clay oddly familiar. Why, there is the palace, he exclaims, begins to search across the tree root for the mountain of Hanryoko, the grave of his dead princess, finds embedded in clay and tucked beneath a pebble shaped like a Buddhist monument, the body of a dead female ant. When the canyon tree frogs emerge, it's that story she thinks of as she watches the school children handle them so carelessly. Some no larger than her smallest fingernail. Don't you know, she thinks, that one is a great poet. The other has just joined the opera. The one by the bike path is a student of the moons. I'll do the last 2. Dew glistens white on grass, black widows start to nest. That September, she learns that after the monsoons, black widows proliferate. She finds the first one in her mailbox, feels the strands of sticky web, hears it rip as she pulls out her hand. The spider is the glassy black of chilled lava, climbs towards her so nimbly she shrieks. 2 days later, she finds one on the backyard fence post, another beneath the seat of her daughter's bike. After that, 3 spherical papery egg sacs, suspended like fingernail-sized Noguchi lamps on the gate at her daughter's school. She collects them with a stick and crushes them underfoot. But once home, she remembers the first story she ever read of Tanasaki's, about the woman who gets the spider tattooed across her skin. She digs out the book and reads it again. Little by little, the tattoo marks began to take on the form of a huge black widow spider, and by the time the night sky was paling into dawn, this weird, malevolent creature had stretched its 8 legs to embrace the whole of the girl's back, it read. The woman, a timid geisha, is transformed when the tattoo is complete. Triumphant, dazzling, deadly, her, quote, old fears have been swept away, quote. When does otherness turn to wonder? How is a story a door? That she begins to think of them as sisters feels salacious, a juicy secret, that she starts to delight in finding their untitled, disheveled tangle webs. Did you know black widows have thousands of slit sensilla embedded in their exoskeletons? Each helps the spider sense vibrations, changes shape to tune the frequencies that echo in her web. And the last one. Ice thickens on streams, snowflakes drift. Snow in the desert is a dream, a mirage. The children stop everything, run barefoot out into the yard, hands up, spinning, leaping among aloes. There is no defter feather. It melts momentarily, falls so quietly it reminds her of Basho. Real poetry is to lead a beautiful life, he says. To live poetry is better than to write it. All begins to blur. Snow falling into abandoned nests, snow falling like the trees require a blanket. The doves, stunned by these chilled feathers, retreat. She sees the black inside the branches. She sees their black eyes inside the branches, prescient, unblinking. Memory is a palimpsest, didn't you know? What is out there is the whole world being erased, reborn. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katherine. That was incredible. Thank you both for such a beautiful reading. As as I'm going to ask just a couple questions to get us going, but if you have a question you would like to ask Katherine or Miho, you can put it into the chat or use the raise hand function, and then I can call on you and just unmute yourself and ask it. So um, I wanted to ask Katherine first, for those of you who don't know that she's also a very accomplished poet, and I wondered how did you kind of make the move from poetry into the lyric essay world? Like, would you be willing to share a little bit of that with us?
Yes, I think that I started getting interested in the lyric essay because there was just so much room for it. Like with a lyric essay, it can be so sprawling. And I mean that in the best kind of way where um you could start with a piece of writing and you could really start with a question, and the whole of the piece of writing can really be about experimenting with a question and kind of investigating that. And so I love that the self can have, it can be, it's sort of like polyvocal. You can have so many selves. You can have the present self, you can have the past self, you can have, incarnations of the self asking these questions, but then also you can also have these, like one of the things that became really important to me was that I had actual writing of these six, actually seven Japanese women writers, that their writing was actually would appear in the book in the way that they had written the words. And so I could actually put that in there, which in a poem is very difficult to do. It's so condensed and distilled. And so it had a lot more room for me to be able to put a lot of different kinds of voices in, scientists and philosophers and surrealists, and to kind of move in that direction. And the questions that I had were big ones. A lot of them that sort of circle in the book are really about where we're at in terms of like the environmental crisis. And so there are no good answers, but I think just asking the good questions and circling around that was helpful for me to have that form, but then still be able to use the poetic gifts. You still have image, you still have symbols that repeat, and weird juxtapositions, and things can move strangely and associatively, just like they can in a poem. So it was really fun to work with that form for that reason. Yeah.
I love the self as polyvocal. That's a really nice phrase. Um, Miho, I was wondering about prose poems because for some of you who haven't read Museum of Small Bones, that there are some really beautiful prose poems in there, particularly Production of Silk and some other ones. And I was wondering if you could share with us, like, how did you get started interested in prose poetry and writing prose poems?
Yeah, I think as Catherine said, I mainly consider myself like a lyric poet, and it's like, you're kind of coming up with a line that's like a clean bone after clean bone after clean bone.
Mm.
And then you kind of start to hunger for a more expansive form. After having experiencing like this kind of a climate of severity, you kind of want something more discursive or chatty. I think Sylvia Plath said something similar when she was asked, "Why do you write fiction?" And she said, you know, um, with poetry, you have to burn so much stuff, like toothbrush and, the trivial things. But she likes toothbrush and all these things, and kind of talking about it, she really needed the prose form. So I think that's what started out my experiment with prose poetry, and um, and I love it. I love things that are kind of on the cusp of something, on the cusp of prose and poetry. Um,
That seems like what a perfect point for this reading, where both of you are existing on this poetry and prose, right on the line there. Yeah, thank you. Um, does anybody else have any comments or questions you'd like to ask Katherine or Miho?
I wanted to share, I'm sorry, like I wanted to share what Catherine gave me.
Oh.
This is a cube of this is a dandelion puff, and it kind of it's encased, it's in kind of contained perfectly, sort of a glory of the dandelion puff. And to me, this is like a poem. Um, and I was also really so deeply moved by the last micro season that Catherine read about Basho and how he said it is a poetry to live a beautiful life, and it is better to live it than writing it. Um, um, Sometimes we're just so focused on production that we don't pay attention to the kind of process. And I think a lyric essay is a kind of form that allows you to show the process um, in this kind of associative movement. Um, and I think that's what I'm so drawn to.
I want to say that both the poem, Miho, that you wrote, and that you read when I feel I'm not much used to human society, and Contained Things are two poems of yours that I've memorized. And so Contained Things, I had been walking in a store and I'd seen this beautiful dandelion. I just couldn't stop thinking about your poem. And I was like, I have to send. So this is for you all. You have to get this book and read this beautiful poem, Contained Things, because you'll understand why. I was like, oh, I have to. So I was like, can I have your address? I have to send you something.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
got a couple of questions. Suzanne, I see your
Yeah.
hand is raised.
Thank you. Oh, that was beautiful, both of you. This starts as a question for Catherine, but perhaps it's for both you and Catherine and Miho. And that is under this rubric of rupture and repair. Catherine has an essay, a beautiful essay on the art of, I'm not sure I'm going to say it right, but um,
Kintsugi.
Kintsugi?
Hmm.
Kintsugi, yes. So this idea of broken pottery that is remade with lacquer and gold dust or various kinds of metallic dust. And this drive for the join, this reparative space of the join, which dovetails with Miho mentioned Cornell and the sort of collaging of well, his capacity to collage. Um, and maybe even your guardian of the useless, that idea, Miho. I wonder if this falls under here. So the question is, to what extent is the rupture of language, both as poets, both of you, and as readers, all of us, a driving force in the work? In other words, is the rupture of language as a poet to break apart sounds, to break apart meaning, to amplify meaning, a driving force here that is fundamentally perhaps towards the same kind of join?
It's such a lovely question. I absolutely love it. And I actually think it speaks in a lot of ways to the form of the lyric essay as well, because the lyric essay is so much about white space. It's about writing towards things that cannot be said directly, that have to be moved, that have to be sort of circled and prodded and discovered in weird and strange ways and juxtapositions. So absolutely, I think that it is, that it's, absolutely that part is a form of it. I would also say that the idea too is so important. Um, I think in a not just sort of like in the ecological sense, but maybe a political sense and a linguistic sense, that not only, with kintsugi, we're not trying to return the object to its original state. We're actually trying to create something new that can acknowledge the lineage of that lineage and rupture. And so I think that part, and I know that Miho shares this interest in the surrealists, because I've read some of her writing on that. But that idea that we have to look at reimagining things, and that's like the process of reimagining must and some of my essays in the book are about, like the art of failure, the art of grieving, the art of all of these like really difficult things, and like looking at them in a totally different way. So yeah.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned surrealism and Catherine has some um some references to surrealism in this stunning essay collection. And I think André Breton, who it was, the center of the Surrealist movement in Paris, he was strongly influenced by Pierre Reverdy. And Reverdy's thing was he defined image as the sort of spontaneous meeting of two different distant realities, and whose relationship can only grasp by a mind. Um, so, and what's interesting is that the more remote the relationship is between those two realities, the stronger becomes a resulting kind of energy. It's kind of like, you're kind of bringing two things, and he kind of imagined electricity, like sort of sparks would be born, and greater, more surprising, this juxtaposition of the images, greater the kind of energy and light it gives off. And so, I think as I was listening to Catherine's reading today, my mind was kind of latching on to the kind of surprising combination of words. And it's another thing. Yeah, so I think with kintsugi, you're trying to restore the shape which, it's no longer the original thing. Just as Catherine said, it's a new thing because you're kind of showcasing the scars, the wound, and it becomes even more beautiful. And with Joseph Cornell, I feel like he was thinking about those trinkets, objects that exist in New York. They're separate. They're kind of exist in like sort of separate parts of New York, but they somehow have a meaningful relationship and your mind grasps it and bring it in together into like say a box. And that's also something I'm just so drawn to. Um, that to be able to perceive relationships among those that are so distant, they are kind of distant realities. And somehow being able to find those associations and connections, it makes life easier to bear. It makes life easier to live because you're not just controlled by kind of a rational mindset.
Beautiful answers. Thank you both.
I have a couple questions for Miho. Def said, Miho, I love your humor, and do you teach?
Thank you so much. That's that's so kind. I do teach right now. I'm teaching at Wheaton College in Illinois, and I teach creative writing, poetry, and Japanese literature and film in translation. Um, yes.
And then Thomas was wondering, regarding finding your identity after losing your dad, which poets do you lean into for comfort and inspiration?
Oh, that's hard. I've been looking for it. I've I've read a lot of Psalms actually, um, in the Old Testament. Um, and what's kind of interesting about Psalms is that it's supposed to be those public songs like that are kind of set to the music of lyre, but what its sentiment is just so personal. Um, And I don't know how that happens, but I guess the public and the sort of a very individual personal grief can come together in that form or in that tradition.
And then one other question here for Miho. Are the second set of poems Miho wrote published in another book? Lynn was wondering.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. The poem about the acorn, the flower and acorns, that was published by Bennington Review, and that's available online. You can just Google it. And what else did I read? Sorry, I should know this. The one called Cremation, that's going to appear in Image Journal, the next issue. Um, and the other ones are new, and so I haven't been, they haven't been published yet. Thank you for your question.
Well, thank you all for asking such thoughtful questions and engaging in this afternoon of readings with us. Um, I think that's about it. So thank you all for being together. We're ending right a little after an hour. That seems perfect. So maybe if you're in a snowstorm, you can enjoy that. If not, you have a nice, quiet rest of your afternoon. Thank you again to Katherine and Miho and to Megan the Poets Corner for hosting this event today. That's a really, really beautiful way to spend our Sunday afternoon. Okay, everyone, thank you.